Okay guys, let's look at our last one here, number 9. Identify the amplitude and period and describe it as transformation of our parent. F of x equals the cosine of x. And notice I've graphed here f of x equals the cosine of x. It's got an amplitude of 1. Again, it starts instead of 0, say 0, 0 like sine x would. It starts at 0, 1 at a peak, and it then goes down to the trough by pi, and then up to the peak again at 2 pi. Okay, so let's now graph, say, the cosine of x plus pi plus 2. Well, let's identify our transformations. Well, this one's in with x, and it's x minus h, so it must have been minus a minus pi. So that would be pi which way? You got it, pi left. And what's the transformation here? Well, that's 2 up, okay, because again, it's outside. Okay, so it's transformed 2 up and pi to the left. And so I'm just going to transfer my labeling down here so that I can... Okay, so what do I want to start with first? Well, that 2 up. I want to deal with that 2 up and draw my new midline here, because instead of the x-axis being the midline, now it's going to be this new midline, which is again y equal to 2. Anytime we have a vertical transformation, we want to put in that midline. Okay, then now let's account for that pi left, okay? Well, instead of, say, starting at 0 here, I'm going to start pi left. Well, let's use the same scale. That would be negative pi halves. And so here would be negative pi. That's going to be our starting location. And if I want, I can dot a longer line here to kind of show that's where I'm going to start my period. Okay, so again, then we want to label all that stuff we always label. Amplitude is the absolute value of 1, which is 1. Period is 2 pi over b. That's also 1, so that's 2 pi. And so I'm going to take that period 2 pi, and I'm going to divide it in how many pieces? You got it, 4 pi halves. So that's how much I'm going to add to my starting location. But I'm not starting at 0, I'm starting at negative pi. Okay, so negative pi plus pi halves multiplied by 2 over 2. Negative 2 pi halves plus pi halves equals negative pi halves. Okay, that's my next location. I already have it there. And what's negative pi halves then plus pi halves, which is, again, what I'm adding each time to it. My period divided in 4 parts. Well, 0. Okay, well, that's next. I have that. And then 0 plus pi halves is pi halves. And then pi halves plus pi halves is pi. Okay. Now, that's where it should end. If I want, I can kind of dot that in just to show that that's my ending spot. And notice, negative pi plus 2 pi, it should be pi. Okay, so length of 1 period. Okay, now what do we want to do next? You got it, make a table. Let me erase. Okay, so negative pi halves, 0 pi halves, and pi. All right, let's do the cosine of negative pi plus pi plus 2. In other words, the cosine of 0 plus 2. Well, what's the cosine of 0? Well, at 0, the x value there is 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. All right, the cosine of negative pi halves plus pi plus 2, which would be the cosine of pi halves, because negative pi halves plus pi is pi halves. Well, the cosine of pi halves are a 90. The x value there is 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. All right, the cosine of 0 plus pi plus 2. 0 plus pi is pi. The cosine of pi plus 2. What's the cosine at pi? Well, on the unit circle at pi, I'm at negative 1 for x. X corresponds with cosine plus 2, negative 1. I'm sorry, positive 1. And then pi halves, 2, and 3. Okay, let's graph it. All right, in negative pi, I'm up here at 3. At negative pi halves, I'm at 2 on my midline. At 0, I'm at 1. And then at pi halves, I'm at 2, back to my midline. And then at pi, I'm at 3. And then I want to go ahead and draw my shape. Into the trough. Okay. So notice the transformations here. Pi halves is shifted left and 2 up. It's got the same amplitude, but it's shifted, phase shifted. In other words, when it's a horizontal shift, it's called a phase shift, which we'll discuss more of going forward. So pi to the left. Okay, so shifted pi left, 2 up. Remember, we started with that midline first. It's got the same period length, but remember, I added that period length to where my new starting point was here at negative pi. And I added whatever it was divided in 4 parts each time, and then it got me to pi, finally where it finishes, okay, after 1 period. And of course, with all these graphs, they would continue, you know. They would continue in the future, right? Right, there's both sine and cosine make this sinusoid shape. However, cosine has a different starting point. Notice it starts at its amplitude, whereas sine starts at its midline. Okay, so I hope this helps, and from here we'll get into graphs of tangent and cotangent and the other functions going forward after 9.4. Okay, thank you.